that much the last 2 years, on and off in a way. But I noticed that it's more difficult to find good flights. It's possible to travel. Yeah. In Sweden, of course, it's also possible to travel where we have our other operations in Norway, in Finland, and so on. But it's difficult to find a good route.
And during this time now, I guess it's been quite different how you've been quite normal or more normal how to handle Sweden versus the sites in Finland and etc.
Yeah, I mean we have previously also worked a lot with video conferencing and so on, but of course now it's much more virtual meetings and so on. But still, it is important to also visit the sites where the actual action goes on, where we actually have our production and so on, to really understand how they using IT and what are the challenges, and so really talk to people. I mean,
and what was the dimension? You get a deeper understanding for the real business.
My experience during these years is that the big things you solve, you set up meetings, you discuss it, you go through it, you run projects and so on. But the small things, the small issues or the small improvements, suggestions and so on, you'd never talk about them.
No.
And they together get important, or the small issues also get important over time, so to say, when they're nagging and don't feel good. So you have to talk about that, and the way you do that is at the coffee machine, or when you just meet people over lunch or in the corridor and so on.
What do you say the biggest differences are between virtual and physical meetings? I mean, I think you mentioned a really good point, which is the coffee machine effect.
Yes.
That, if you don't have this kind of improvised meeting places, you don't come up with these kind of improvised discussion topics. But I also think, when you have a virtual meeting, it's harder in some way to have a more interactive discussion. I find it at least that you follow the agenda, so to speak, to a bit more, to the point, and it's harder to have this kind of more feedback, interactive discussions in a virtual setting.
Yeah, I think it's two things. One thing is that it's only one person at a time can talk.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in a meeting room with 10 persons, you can say something to your neighbor and just a little comment, and you get other
dynamics.
Dynamics. And the other thing is actually the small time lag, meaning you can't interrupt people in the same way. Here I can say, stop, and I can shout or wave my hands or whatever, but you can't do that really. And you can raise your hand digitally.
And then when the presenter is presenting, he can't see it anyway. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's also about the body language in some sense. I mean, you can see the person in the camera, but it's not the same full experience, I would say. If you see someone, right?
Have you mastered how to be creative or shaping, or like the typical whiteboard workshop post-its? That's an interesting one.
Yeah,
where we have become quite
done
fun.
some. You can do some, but and it's possible, but it requires quite a lot of preparation. It does in reality as well, but digital may be a bit more of preparation, actually.
Yeah, a little bit actually becomes also, we shouldn't go there maybe, but it's also a little bit like trying to figure out what digital tools work for this sort of whiteboard experience. It's a big difference, I think. I've done so many workshops like that, and some of them is like, we use the planner board in Teams, or someone opens up a PowerPoint and we start fiddling around, or someone has actually a quite nice digital tool like Miro or something like this. This has been a learning curve for me, at least, during these years.
And I don't think we should also not dismiss the virtual meetings completely. I mean, of course, you want to have physical meetings when you can, but there are advantages with having virtual meetings as well.
Absolutely, right? As I said, for the bigger things, the projects, the things that are ongoing. I mean, if you have startup is maybe difficult, but when you have a project, you have a plan, you have follow up, or specific things you're addressing, then it's absolutely it's a good thing. And as I said, we we have been working a lot with video conferencing and Skype and so on before for many years. So we are.
So Boliden is in a very like distributed company to start with, right?
Yes.
And has been for many years.
Yes.
So I would say from the experience I have, with you, Göran, I think in one way you were more prepared in terms of having. I mean, like you have a pretty fancy video conference set up years back.
Yeah.
And compared to have nothing, right? So
I would say so. So there was not a big, and we implemented Teams like 3 months before the pandemic started. So it was well prepared, but no big.
Is that
change.
the software of choice, the Microsoft Teams software?
Yeah, we are pretty much a Microsoft company, I would say.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and
good or bad, but
maybe to end up this interesting conversation is a little bit like, have you had any thoughts or discussions already on sort of your workplace flexibility or policy, or how to be in the office and not in the office, or what type of meetings we really should? What's your thoughts here? When do we really benefit from meeting, and how to treat this?
Well, the company standpoint here is that still the main workplace is in the office due to different reasons. We believe that it's important that people, let's say, meet at the coffee machine and so on to get a bit of dynamics. And also we have a big part of our workforce, more than half is. They can't work from home. Not yet, though. Mine workers and factory workers and so on.
But in 5 years they could, you think?
Maybe. Let's talk about that.
This is super interesting.
It's not only fantasy. But today they have to be at work, of course. So and then also white collar should be at work. But we are getting a bit more flexible. So. Sometimes once in a while, etc. And personally, I think, now I'm sitting in headquarters. I normally, in more or less every meeting, there are people from other places. So we have Teams meeting, and then I can sit wherever. It doesn't matter really.
Yeah, so I would say your company culture for years has been hybrid meetings. In some ways, that there's not all. Like how often is everyone?
No, exactly. And that's also learning myself. We don't have a policy, but hybrid meetings is not working good.
No,
either you should be in the same room, or everyone should sit at their own PC.
Do you think that works best?
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you have 10 person in a room and 2 persons. Virtually, it's
quite common. It's quite common.
It is, but then the ones not in the room gets a bit off in the discussion.
They cannot have the same feeling. No. Oh, there's so many dimensions on this.
Yes.
Yeah. But have we learned? And like final question: have we learned something? Or did something based on the more intensified work like this? Did you change anything, or like this one, for example? Like it's actually better to be a full online or full. I think that is one of those. I agree with that. Actually,
we have not changed, so to say, by policy, but I think that is the experience from most people. So I see a tendency that people stay in their room to not go to the conference room. They stay at their PC to attend the meeting.
That's and more now than before.
More now than before.
Yeah, makes sense.
So,
interesting conversation.
Yeah, you can talk about that for a long time.
But we need to, of course, introduce our guest, our first guest for the 2022 season. So we're kicking it off with a big bang. We're super happy that you could join us here today.
I'm so glad to be here.
Göran Kördel.
Kördel.
I always say wrong.
It's okay.
Yeah, Göran Kördel.
I'm happy to be here. We've been talking about this for a while, but we postponed it.
Yeah, we did a couple of COVID. We feel safe and all that, which is super good. But now you're here, Göran, and we are super happy to start this season with a big bang like that. So why don't we start in that end? Who is Göran, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so currently I'm then CIO of Boliden. I've been so for almost 8 years now. We can talk about Boliden in a short while, but before Boliden, my career, you can say, I've worked with 3 different professions in a way. I've been working with finance. I've been business controller. I've been also working with service business, and then the last, I think, 20 years with IT. So I have a long history in Ericsson, and there I started with finance and so on, and then worked with their service, telecom service business when they started up in the 90s.
And in what way was it connected to finance? Was it from a controller point of view, or
the finance was a controller? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Different type.
In Ericsson.
Control in Ericsson.
Yeah.
Mainly. Yeah. I've been in other companies.
Which part of
also.
Ericsson was it?
Well, different parts. I started actually in the what's called RIFA. It's the microchip factory.
Cool.
At that time. It's not existing any longer in Ericsson, but anyway. And then in Ericsson radio and mainly. So I've seen the whole radio mobile development from the 80s. And
what do you think about Ericsson in general, and the current state of affairs that they have, and the competition with some Chinese companies or whatnot? Do you follow that, or?
Yeah, well, I follow it in the media, so I mean, in a way. No, I mean, Ericsson is still world leading in the telecom,
right.
which is pretty impressive for being that for so many years.
Yeah. But how do you see the global competition, so to speak? That's more my
the global competition has been there all the time. We talked about that in the 90s, that in 5-10 years there will be only a handful of telecom companies, of which at least 2 would be Chinese, and that's the reality.
So that leads to the following question: how do you see in 10 more years? How do you see the Chinese competition growing or decreasing?
Well, yeah, who could tell? There will definitely be strong Chinese suppliers in that area. Definitely, I mean they're
investing heavily, and they've been doing it well for some time now.
They do, yeah, and they do it long term. That's the Chinese way. They don't look at the quarter; they look at the 5-year plan at least, and persistent and so on. And I mean telecom. Like other technology areas, it's strategic, so I'm sure they will be there.
And were you in the managed service part?
And then I was part of building this managed service. So I was part of that when in the beginning of the 90s in telecom, all services was for free. Yeah. You bought a network and you had an eternal service on everything. And then some people understood that it should be the same as had happened in IT a couple of years before, that you could actually make money out of services. Repair, consultancy, trading, different types of professional services and so on. So I was part of building that. And then came the IT and telecom crash 2000, what was that, 1 or something. And I was part of a reorganization and ended up in IT, you can say. Yeah. It was not really a choice, it was temporary. And so it's been for 20 years now.
Yeah, so and then Ericsson, were you in IT in Ericsson and then moving on to other places in IT?
Yes, I was in Ericsson. Ericsson outsourced IT 2002 or 3. And then realized that, we can't outsource everything. We need to have a few people that are running it as well. So I and some other leftover managers got the assignment to take care of the outsourced IT, which was a mess. I mean, that was 20 years ago, outsourcing. And
I actually remember this.
So that was interesting. Very messy, but I learned a lot.
And what is the main learning when you outsource? What is the
that's a pod of its own. No, I mean it is it's matured a lot over the years. The suppliers has matured, and
the buyers has matured. We have matured.
We have matured. The methodology has matured, and everything is different now. So,
yeah. And just a gossip question here. The CEO of Ericsson, the previous came from managed service. Is it Björn?
Which one?
No, I was just thinking that one of the CEOs, I can't remember which, if it's the latest one, came out of business control and managed service, and I was thinking if you know who I'm talking about. If you don't, that was a silly question.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, well.
No, the gossiping question was it if you ever were close to one of the people that then later on took on the CEO hat of Ericsson.
Well, yeah, I met a lot of people, but now it was a long time since I left Ericsson.
Yeah. Good.
It's history, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and then I was after a couple of years then in IT there, I was recruited to Sandvik.
Right. And this was 2008 or something?
2008, yes, you're well prepared. Right. And Sandvik was then a company with some central IT and a lot of distributed IT. And after 2 years, I got an assignment to there was a wave of centralizing in Sandvik, 2011 something, and I got the assignment to then gather all IT, and I became the one CIO. Before Sandvik maybe had 30 or 50 CIOs, and now they should have one. And got that. So, and then we ran that, and I made the outsourcing there from my experience. So, and then.
But can you just backtrack a bit and speak a bit about what people don't know what Sandvik does? Can you just explain?
Sandvik?
Yes.
Yeah. Sandvik is an interesting industrial group. I claim it's maybe the most complex one because it's a lot of different products, a lot of different customer areas. They make, mining equipment, for example, which is a good experience now when I work at Boliden. And they make special steel, and they make tools for industries and so on, and a number of other things as well. Yeah. So it's in a way conglomerate. So centralizing things like we did then maybe was not well thought throrough fully.
So centralizing what? The whole business or some IT department?
All you can say all back office things.
It sounds good on paper that we should be able to do this centrally, but the nature of the business is quite different.
I wouldn't say it's right or wrong, but it requires a lot of work to do it.
Yeah. So it's more about when you set out on this journey, be careful to fully understand the type of organization you're doing it for, and then you do your homework in relation to those problems or those issues that will arise.
Exactly. So but now we're up to 2014, 13 something. So I left Sandvik. I actually worked as my own as a consultant for a year. And then I got this opportunity to start at Boliden 2014, that was, I think.
Right, and a consultant, that was the Northwise Management?
Yeah,
nice.
It's called that.
and what did you do as consultant?
What I did, yeah, good question. Well, it was my skill then, now maybe it's IT management. How do you run IT strategy and things? It tended to be quite a lot around outsourcing, from my experience then from Ericsson and also from Sandvik. So.
And for people that are still considering outsourcing, what can you give any nice tips or do's and don'ts for when to do outsourcing or not?
Well, that's a lot of things to think about there. Of course, you need to understand why you're doing it. I mean, what's
the real driver?
Yeah, what's the driver? You need to, when you do it, you need to make sure that you set up a good governance together with the ones that you out. I mean, you have to see it like a kind of partnership where you do this together. So it's not a procurement. You build a relationship. It's going to be long term. Then there are things that definitely you I think could be benefit to outsource basic services. In Boliden, for example, we have outsourced our workplace service, our PC laptop handling. I consider that is a very standardized service. Commodity. So that offloads then the IT organization, and we can focus on more specific things. And the other side of that coin is, of course, that the things that are really specific for your company, your specific systems or whatever, you should maybe not outsource then, and you have to decide what is, you can call it strategic or not strategic, but you have to have that kind of discussion. And I claim then, and I've done that for all my time, that service desk is a strategic asset. Because service desk is the IT organization's ear and customer interface. And it requires actually a good knowledge of the company, because people call and ask for different things. And if you don't understand what they talk about, then it doesn't work.
So on the surface, it can look like, this is a basic function service desk. We can outsource that.
Yes, I mean that was in the 90s or beginning of the...
But the experience of having done this a couple of times, this one is actually, don't do that.
You can save a few bucks, but your user experience goes down. Yes.
Yeah. Would you say your strategic thinking and principal ideas and philosophy of how to think about outsourcing has evolved?
In one aspect, because then there's another element, and that is the traditionally also you have outsourced IT operation, data center, server operation, and so on. And I think that will die shortly, because what's
Which
happening...
one do you mean? Like a data center, you should run your own data centers, you mean? Or?
No, because what type of system do you have now? Every new system is a cloud system.
Yeah.
So the outsourcing is really done, but it's actually the cloud setup that is...
The cloud. So, I mean, in actually, again, in Boliden, we have not really made any... We have our own data center, but I don't see... really that's a good idea to outsource the operation of the data center, but it's more that we are getting more and more cloud systems.
Yeah, and potentially then, or theoretically then, you could then outsource the operations of the cloud, but now it's getting really strange because we're moving quite far up in the OSI stack, what we are outsourcing. Yeah,
I'm not exactly clear here, but I mean the data center you have someone provides it as a cloud service instead. So that's.
So are you pro like having using cloud services, or should you run stuff on premise? I didn't really follow what you think is good.
No, I'm just. No, I don't have actually figure, but I read somewhere from Gartner that a couple of years ago. 72% of all new software is a software as a service, and I realized that way we just changed our HR system to Workday, which is a cloud service. We are running finance as a software as a service, etc., etc. So every time we change a system, especially an administrative system, we buy a software as a service.
Yeah, and
in that way we outsource
but
the operation
in a different way.
Yeah, but our strategic view is, you can do that on that type of services. Then we have some systems that we run for our operation, for our production, which some of them are real-time systems. And that I see a big difficulty to outsource, because they have to, I mean, if you get interrupted a second or a minute, the production stops. You can't allow that. You have to have it not only in our own data center, you have it locally on the production side. But
this, I want to test a theory I have around this. What trying to understand where the market and where the industry is going, because to me, one of the hypotheses that I've been talking a lot on stage is that the more data AI software becomes ingrained in what is actually the core operations. I mean, like it's converging what is physical, what is digital. And we are talking about automation to a quite high degree, potentially in a couple of years. Then the whole sort of interface, the traditional IT supply, IT demand setup, and we know business but no tech, and we know data and IT, and we can outsource from here. It's sort of that shifts to that we will have, infra or platform servicing type organizations, and then we will have the business value chain, which is now a business data AI software core operations value chain. That was a long one.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? What I'm trying to say is that the core, some of the core data skills or understanding the algorithms is one of the team members in the core team in the domain with the domain knowledge, right? You can't do algorithms on some of this stuff if you don't have very close connection to the domain knowledge. Mm-hmm. And of course then how to think about this outsourcing and what can be outsourced and in what way we should definitely not outsource or what skills we need to have internally. Mm-hmm. I think that is shifting.
Yes.
I expect that to shift. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think I follow what you said.
Yeah, but because and this has come from sort of working in Vattenfall for several years now. Been working a bit with Scania, but also been in the industry, and there is a spectrum of maturity in understanding is tech people going to be part of the core operations versus IT demand, IT supply type thinking. And I think this is quite profound, that how we organize tech people in this sense.
No, I mean, we will talk about more about AI and data analytics, I suppose. But I mean, we need to increase our capability, resources, and competence in all different parts of the organization.
Exactly.
I mean, there are parts that are more of a platform type, basic. You can call it AI infrastructure or whatever, and that of course is very tech, and that could be in the central view, and maybe parts of it actually are also outsourced.
Yes.
And then when you get more and more closer to applying it and using it, of course, it has to be as a working tool for everyone in the business, more or less.
Yeah. This is so many angles on this conversation, of course, but it's interesting to talk about this, entering into it from the outsourcing starting point in this conversation, right? Because I think in many ways business outsourced to IT, that we are business demand and you're IT, and then we took IT and we outsourced it here, and this pendulum to understand this whole landscape is.
But if you talk about what you can do in society, say in the cloud and on-prem, etc. I mean everything that's not analytics that you have to do to have more long-term or mid-term consequences or decisions on, you can do in the cloud, because it's not time critical in that sense. But if you're going to use AI to control the production operation, then you have to have it very close.
Now we get all the way to edge intelligence.
Exactly. I mean it's called edge now, but it's a local service. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Oh wow! But here now in Sandvik, I'm a little bit curious. Do you remember what triggered you, or how did you come about when you went into Boliden? What was the anecdote about joining Boliden?
Well, someone called me and asked me.
Simple as that.
Yeah, no, not as simple as that. There was a process in that as well. But I actually had other opportunities also. But I've been working in Swedish industry for all my years. I felt that maybe that's my turf. So Ericsson, Sandvik, and so on. So it felt like this is the right profile. Different companies, but still it's a lot of
Swedish industry.
Yeah, similar environment and culture in one way.
And now then we're entering 2014 into Boliden. And do you remember, first 90 days, how did you get, what was the focus then, and how has that evolved maybe a little bit on that, and then we need to talk a little bit about Boliden, of course, as a company.
Yes, my boss told me couple of things, but one thing that just make sure it's working.
Yeah, I like that.
And it can't cost anything, more or less. And if it doesn't work, I will tell you. But otherwise, you take care of it. I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's one thing. He's been very supporting, and I'm changing manager, so no issue about that. But there was one other thing, and that was that it was said, you take care of the office IT. And then we have other groups working with production IT or OT.
You use the term IT and OT in
yes,
Boliden.
yeah. I mean, that's one way. So IT for office, administrative IT or whatever you call it, and the OT is more operational IT, what you have in production.
So IT,
level
OT,
1 to
IT,
3. Or
information technology operations.
operational technology.
Yeah, I guess. And this is 14.
This is 14. And then I started to look into how people were working. And I realized that now that was not the case. It was people were working with both and together very much. And I took away, that was in the description of the job and organization, that it was separated. But I took that away. And I realized that the only way to be successful is that we don't have borders in between. Yes, there were people from different organizations, but the key success factor is that we work very, very close. Production engineers, IT people working with OT and so on. Because, previously, when even if I worked with Sandvik, there were separate networks, they were separate environments. You didn't have any really interaction or flow of data between the IT and the OT. But today everything hangs together. The network hangs together. You drag data from the machines and you take it up to the cloud and to the finance systems, and everything goes together. So that's the only way is to really work.
But this is what you're saying now is quite interesting, because there's a lot of organizations. I've worked at one of them where of course this almost cat and dog relationship between IT and OT exists, and I never understood it, but it was quite clear. And this is 14. Was it easy, that cultural shift, to see understand this is converging? This is truly converging in some ways.
I would say that on the operational level, it had already shifted. So they were working together. It was more in the management that didn't understand it, that was a success factor. But today we work together. I mean, there are different organizations involved, but close cooperation.
And do you remember if you were doing a very simple distinction between IT and OT? Office IT, of course. I remember if it's OC soft Pi, if it's sort of time series data related to the machines, technology related, software related to the machines, or the assets, it's OT.
Exactly. It's if you take the what's called the ISO 95 standard, level 0 to 3 is OT or something, or behind the. I mean, we have firewalls behind the different.
But in 2022, it's all data, right? We want to automate, we want to steer data,
yes.
And we want to take the data to analyze.
But there is differences still. One difference is of course, historic reasons, that the OT environment is built differently. It's not, in that sense, you can say, not so mature in a way. It's machines more. But it's also different in the way that in OT environment, what's most important is availability. In the IT environment, it's the information that's most important. So when it comes to cybersecurity or IT security, in the IT environment you protect the information, but in the OT environment you need to protect the availability. You don't want to. there's not so much of information to steal in an OT environment, but you don't want anyone to interrupt the availability, stop the machines, right?
But this is very interesting because it then, of course, it has been two underlying drivers to the architectural decisions that has been made, rightfully so, of course.
Yeah.
So, and this needs to still be balanced, of course. So even if we talk about, we can take this into the difference between, analytics and machine learning for recommender systems in operational environments. I'm going on down a rabbit hole now, but I think it's a good example. I mean, there's people are trying to understand what is a data scientist or what is machine learning, and if you come from one camp, you've been working with reporting and BI and advanced analytics, and then it's sort of you have the people they are not working in an OT environment. They're not working in a real-time environment. They're working on creating insights, contextualizing, almost like from the statistical mathematics. You can use machine learning technology-wise, blah blah blah, the same, and then you have hardcore machine learning engineering recommender systems that are working in real time. And we can take Spotify is the soft critical. If you do it wrong, and then you can go to a mine, and it's quite super critical. It's real time, and you're steering equipment, right? But you can use machine learning. So for me, data scientists, this is you can say data science and machine learning, but it's quite two different contexts of advanced analytics versus building recommender systems or real-time systems. Would you agree with that sort of rant?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is that you need to understand the domain, the area you're working in.
Yeah, and the hook, the bottom line is that when you look at it, we're all data scientists, and I've been doing data science, so now I can work on OT recommender systems for mining. Well, it's not the same as you've been doing advanced analytics, really sophisticated, by the way, but not an engineering feat in the same way.
No, that's right. Another aspect of another rabbit hole, you can call it, is then cybersecurity, and we can talk about that for a while as well, because before then it was easy to, in a way, it was not so interesting to maybe address the OT area for cyber criminals. It was not easy to do because it was disconnected. It was a separate environment. It was no. Air gap and so on, but it's not any longer. It hangs together, and that is also.
But before we move into cybersecurity, I think it's a super important topic.
Let's go deep on this today.
Yeah, but let's
take a note.
I have done that. Let's just speak a bit more about BI versus AI, perhaps, or AI, of course, and machine learning can be used both for BI purposes or for OT purposes, so to speak. And I know the CEO of Peltarion, where I worked before, he was very adamant about trying to understand the differences because so many people thinks that AI is just the next steps of analytics, and then thinking analytics in terms of BI, and I think what he was trying to say is that AI can be used without having to have done the full analytics pipeline. So some people think that in being able to make use of data in some sense, you have to first build up the whole BI pipeline. You have to do all the centralized data gathering in some kind of centralized location. You have the BI metrics that you can start to measure and the KPIs, and you can do the business insights, which is super important, of course. But some people have the misunderstanding, I would argue, that you have to do that first before starting to use AI. What he was trying to say, if I'm paraphrasing him, is you can start, for example, like another manufacturing company, to use AI just to do predictive maintenance, and that's completely separate from the BI purpose. And they can start to gather data to understand if this machine is starting to break down and build a solution directly right now, even though if they don't have a properly data-driven BI solution in place right now. So they are rather independent, and they shouldn't be seen as analytical ladder, which is a common phrase that we have. Would you agree with this? Or
yes, but
okay, but I like it.
Yeah. Now, first of all, I for simplification, I think about this area as BI, and then you have analytics, and then the third level is machine learning AI.
That's the ladder. That's the ladder we are talking about.
That's the ladder. I mean, and we have been trying to use analytics and also some AI and so on, start some projects, but I think most organizations need to go through a period of where you use BI and visualize the data you have, just to get the maturity in the organization. You should not underestimate that step. It's so obvious when managers or people starting to see, oh, can I get that? And can I get that? And then they start to understand that the data is useful. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to jump to the machine learning directly. You can do some pilots, but it's hard to get it scaled if you don't have the push from the business that they
let's
need.
Decompose this, because I'm really opinionated. Basically, my opinion rests with both of you right now. And and my
don't have to be that diplomat.
No.
all the time.
No, I'm not diplomat. I think this is a super important topic around AI and data, because I used the same analogy when we were going down the BI reporting, and to get sort of analytics used, or optimizing how we make decisions, so to speak. And then basically to visualize, it starts the whole conversation on data transparency, data quality. Like a lot of fundamental stuff gets up to the surface that is needed in order to do better reporting analytics. But what I also think is that there is a fundamental different route where you it's a little bit like, this is the sort of optimization or optimizing decision point of view. And then you can argue that you can come into this conversation around using algorithms to steer operational process, right? Which is very, very close to the hardcore operational process. Mm-hmm. And the main distinction, I think, that Anders is making, that in order to build an enterprise insights, you need to have all the data clean, and you need all of this. But here, actually, you need 2 or 3 data sets, and then you can go hard, you can go nuts in this task.
I fully agree, and that's absolutely the right tactics to start small and build. That's what everyone say, and you need to prove value, etc.
But now back to your but the problem is that the stakeholders who you were trying to convince that you can actually steer this process differently, if they have done this path and they have gone acquainted with data, they are receptive to this use case. That's the bottom line
exactly.
Here. But then perhaps there is some short path to take here. I mean, you need to have at least some basic understanding of the possibilities with data and AI, and that needs to be well grounded in the management team, so to speak, if they are going to invest in using data and AI in any part of the company, if it's a finance part or the sales part or the logistics or the production or the whatever kind of manufacturing part of the company could be. But do you need to wait until you actually have the full analytics pipelines in place before you can do that, or can you?
No, I can. I mean, I have only experience from Boliden now in this area, really, the last years, and I can tell you how we have been working with it. And you can say we started our journey 2017. You can say. I mean, we realized in the IT, a couple of persons, that we have a lot of data. We need to make information and use of it, of course. So what should we do? So we made a strategy work, both from the technical side, how should we build our BI and so on, and also to identify use cases and so on. And then we sold that to management, and they said, it's probably a good potential here, and yes, okay, you can.
It wasn't the business coming to you in this type of year.
No, it was not.
You had to educate.
It was IT who drove that, and we got some money to set up some data platforms for real-time data and for structured data and so on. So far, so good. And that was 2017, and then really not so much happened. We run a few pilots and so on, but not really anything happened. Last year, or maybe 2020 or 2021, now it's starting to explode. And I don't know what made it happen, but
I was going to ask that question. But
well, could be different things. But one thing was the use of Power BI to visualize. I think that was the thing.
You mean Microsoft Power BI?
Yeah. Now you can use different tools here also.
Yeah.
As we do in radio.
No.
Different tools.
Here we are completely politically incorrect.
In our case, we choose that one. And we had a process to easily apply that. And then the ball started rolling. And they were asking, can we do this? Can we visualize this? And instead of this Excel that we use every morning, can you drag it into a Power BI report and we on screens and everything? And I don't know how many thousand of Power BI reports we had.
Right.
And after that, they were more thinking, can we do bit of analytics on that? Can we do to have this flow and optimized? And maybe we should start an AI program. So we have started an AI program also. So this let's say first 2 years of nothing, and then now 1.5 year of visualization, and now the maturity really started. Now we have another problem. Now we from IT don't have the capability to meet up the demands.
No, because now they're getting inventive what they want to do, and you realize, yes, that should be able to do that, but that's a different ballgame.
I mean, we don't have the resources and skills to meet up here fully.
But I think this is a very, very interesting point of view. So why do we do BI self-service? And everybody's been selling BI self-service and all these kind of things as its own holy grail. But actually, this resonates with the storytelling I was doing in Vattenfall, where we basically said, look, let's get here, because when we give them data and they see the dirtiness or they see the first insight, that will trigger the next question. And so this is part of the learning curve. So the data literacy topic that we also talk about as an issue on executive and all that. Gartner's talking about it. Everybody's talking about it, that if we want to accelerate, we need to have deeper understanding. Well, when you start visualizing data, it's a quite powerful learning curve in that. And it's because you start realizing if you could do that, what happens? So, and I think that is quite huge.
Yeah, and the visualization tools like Power BI now is so powerful and easy to work on. So that's I think is a component also.
Yeah. So, but the point of this is it means it's not a ladder per se how you really need to think, but it has something to do with the how to drive the maturity and literacy.
I would be a bit more controversial than that and say that I think traditionally the ladder is what companies have done, and that is how they made it work, and I'm really glad that it made it work, so to speak. But I hope that in the future companies don't have to take that journey, if you see what I mean. I hope there are quicker ways to start making use of data and AI than have to take the full journey of the ladder. And if that were possible, I think more companies can more quickly start to really become more data and AI driven.
But then that will happen. But it hangs together, I think, with again maturity of management. You know, when management start asking for something, of course, things gets happening, and you really need to have a good vision in this area to drive this from management point of view.
Let me talking about other topic then. You mentioned that,
to have a vision, you need to understand it yourself, etc.
Exactly.
And that will come in a couple of years, I think, in many companies more and more.
And that was my point, So you mentioned, after some time there is an inflection point or something happening that makes people really ask for having an increased use of data and AI in some way, or more, visualization and use of data in some way. And that it takes some time for that inflection point to happen, to get that increase in demand happening. But when that happens, or hopefully before, you want to know, what is the most valuable thing to do right now, given the limited amount of resources that we have in the IT department or the competence that we have with data scientists and data engineers that we have. So then you can do that, I think, in two ways. And I would argue that there is this kind of catch-22 here. Either you can be driven by the possibilities of the technology, from technology people and data scientists and data engineers saying, I really want to use this latest type of model to build whatever. And then they're driven by technology. And if you're purely driven by technology, that's clearly dangerous. You can take the complete other extreme, which is you're completely driven by the needs of the business. With the person driving a truck or the person in a finance department saying, I want to use data for this specific purpose, for this process that I have in the business right now. And I think perhaps we can use AI and data to just improve the current business processes that we have in some way. Both are useful, but I would argue it's dangerous if we just do business-driven or just do technology-driven development. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, fully agree. As you say, I mean, if you're just technology-driven, it won't take off. It will just be pilots.
Exactly.
If you do the other way, you don't change the way of working, which you need to. It's not about just doing the same in a computer. You need to rethink if you could do differently. So you need to do both, and so you need to continue to do pilots of new technology and test things. But of course, you need to fulfill the obvious demands where you can do savings as well. And then you have to set up some kind. And we're struggling here and discussing, set up some kind of governance or for us where you really discuss and prioritize and evaluate what you do next. And
biting my lip, but the real, I think the leap I want to make in this conversation here is back to one of me and Anders' favorite topics, and maybe even favorite person in terms of entrepreneurship. Elon Musk is talking a lot about first principles. Have you ever heard that term?
No, tell me. Please.
No, so you can Google him talking about this. First principles is. Is something that was coined by, is it Aristotle or Plato or something like that? It's the fundamental idea that you go back to the core of something. And I think the example that is sort of fueling Elon Musk's empire is that he looks at the problem and then he deconstructs it to its fundamental core and then trying to understand how can I solve this in a completely different way or in a better or cheaper way given tech. And Elon Musk takes this whole first principle to an engineering level. So he's, you love to do, I steal your example. We shoot rockets, right? Do you really need to crash them? Why can't we reuse them? So first principle, what does it take to flip the whole thing, right? And this has resonated deeply with me because that's how I started to understand if you really want to transform with data and AI, you basically need to recognize that, a lot of our processes has been analog, that has got some data system support for a task. And now, 20, 30, 40 years later, what happens if I realize, all that data exists somewhere else and we already have it. So what if I rethink the whole thing, right? And this then, to me, drives home the real holy grail and also the crux of the dilemma. You need to have super deep data AI technology savviness, and then you need to have your fundamental domain expertise deep in order to put them together in order to rethink, if flipping the process or reinventing the process, so to speak, with data and AI first in mind, because it was never done. Yeah. And this is really, really hard, right? Because it means the guys who has the domain knowledge, they don't have the tech knowledge. And the guys who have the tech knowledge, so now we do what we are saying. We need to do both. We need to push in new technology. Yeah. This is sort of the iterative way to get this happening, converge.
And to make this happen, you need to run, you can call it programs or projects where you set aside these people to full-time, just focus on this. Otherwise, It won't happen. That's also an experience. You can do improvements in doing the same, etc., and you can implement what you have or so on. But if you really like to make that type of innovation or changes, you need to let people work focused on that.
And so I would you need to have the cross-functional people working together with a clear focus over time. So you need them to gel as a line. The new line operation, so to speak, will grow out of this core new DNA, which is a cross-functional team. If it starts, if they don't work together really deep, this cannot be done ping pong, IT demand, IT supply. It has to be a project or a program that then becomes something. I fully agree with that.
We haven't talked so much about Boliden.
No, thank you. Thank you for being the host.
Promotional.
No. That was the logical step. We got down to some really good rabbit holes, by the way, and we love that. But please, Boliden, let's put the context here.
Yeah, so for the one that don't know Boliden, but I mean we are almost 100-year-old company.
Exactly.
Started in Västerbotten in Sweden as a mining gold. But Boliden has today two different business units. It's mines and it's smelters. So we take the whole value chain from finding minerals, that's called exploration, and then mine it, which is what you do when you mine. You drill, you blast, and then you dig the stone out of it. And then you crush and handle these stones, concentrating it. So that's what mining operations is about in total. And then we have the smelters where they take this concentrated minerals and refine it like an oil refinery, to pure metals, and we make sometimes everything except iron and steel. We call it base metals. That's copper, zinc, nickel, lead, gold, silver, everything. When you take out,
you do the fancy stuff.
We do the fancy stuff. Yeah.
Why not iron? By the way,
sorry.
Why not iron?
Well, it's a different business. It's a different places you find it and so on. Okay.
It's never been your core. You never.
It's never been. It's other stuff. But often when you dig out, zinc, you also have copper, and you have some gold, and you have all silver or whatever. It's so. But they say it's fancy, but it really is, because that's the thing that we are now trying to understand and our place in the new society, which I realize is now very important, because you need all these minerals to electrify society. I mean, you can't. When we're talking about the difficulty in Sweden to have electricity in south of Sweden, how do you solve that? Why do you need to have a lot of copper cables to transport the electricity, right? You need to have other metals to build batteries and so on. So electrification requires a lot of minerals.
With increased focus in electrification has really put Boliden as a mining company is one of the core hotspots.
Yeah, so I mean, traditionally mining is a dirty, not environmental friendly, but actually when we're struggling with this CO2 issues, we are part of the solution, not the problem.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe how?
Yeah, as I said, I mean,
because you lead to electrification.
Exactly. Electrification is in many cases the way we're trying to get out of CO2, right? Mm-hmm. And to do electrification, you need to build copper cables. You need to have batteries. You need to have different metals
the
in this.
Ingredients and raw materials in the electrified world has the minerals in them. Unfortunately,
you need a lot of minerals to build wind power plants, for example, and etc. So,
but Boliden is also very known for sustainable operations as well, right? I guess that means also mean that the operations itself should be sustainable.
Exactly. So I mean, we are a production company first of all. We are to describe that shortly. We are not a product company. We make raw material, pure copper, etc. So and that is something that is there's a world market for it. So we really don't set the price for the product. It's set in the world market.
It's a commodity price.
It's a commodity. Exactly, it's a commodity.
Sold in a commodity.
And so the drawback is we can't control the price. Now the price has been pretty good the last years, but it goes up and down. The benefit of this is that it's always a market, so we can sell everything we produce, which means that all the focus gets onto production to produce as much as possible. So productivity is of course important. So there, when it comes now into automation, optimizing processes with the AI or analytics, etc., that's a core thing to improve the productivity. But also, of course, sustainability is important. Sustainability and safety, worker safety. That's so efficiency, sustainability, and safety. That's the three core objectives. And the sustainability, of course, been more and more important. So, we have, but we are. I can say we are actually the most fossil friendly mining company in the world in those metals. And we have calculated on copper. We are doing it on other metals, but on copper we have now launched what we call the green zinc. Green copper. We will do it on zinc later on, hopefully. Which not saying that it's fossil-free production, but it's much lower than any other mining company. But we're also driving, of course, to take down the.
But this is high on your agenda. I mean, so of course, to be efficient is always high on the agenda. But this sustainability has
it is, yeah.
And has that gradually increased? Or?
It's increased a lot the last 1-2 years.
Yeah. So with the whole.
Yeah, with the whole society.
So how do you become more or less fossil dependent? Are you starting to electrify the?
Yes, a lot is electrification. Yes, in the mines we have or are today using quite a lot of diesel for our trucks, etc. And we're electrifying those, and then we have the processes in the smelters. Also trying to electrify. It's more difficult, but we do that as well. And then we try to look at the whole value chain, transportation and.
So you have electrified trucks now in the mines? Or
electrified, and then also starting up to have autonomous trucks as well.
Ooh, that's an awesome topic.
Now we're coming back to.
Let's
I'd add that to the
IT.
list.
We have so many cool because this is why I think having Boliden and Göran here is such a star show, because people don't know some of the cool stuff that is happening. You know, in brackets, dirty industries. That is super cool.
It is. I mean, the core of then how to develop the company in those areas is a lot of automation. I mean, we've been running automation for decades. Mechanical automation, electromechanical automation. But today, automation it's based on computer, right?
And I think this is a misconception, right? That people don't understand that in some ways, you have your plus and minuses, but in some areas, because efficiency and because of what you described of how it works when you sell a commodity, of course, your culture, your whole company has been ingrained in understanding automation for many, many, many years, which truly sets you up to actually. If you now start about, let's jump the whole stupid BI ladder and go for automation. I think culture-wise, if with the right education, you are well positioned because this is part already of. I mean, there are many companies who don't talk about automation like you have done for decades. So this is for me really, really.
Well, I think a lot of manufacturing companies have that also in their genes to. Automate and so on, but again, the driving factor for us is the more we can produce per man hour or per invested crown, etc., the more income we get. So we're always trying to find where can we take away bottlenecks? Where can we automate that? But also from sustainability or safety perspective, can we take away other dirty jobs, dangerous jobs, etc.? And that's a benefit for everyone.
But should we go down?
But just before we do that, I mean, you want to automate some parts of the business, and I think you mentioned a number of criteria. Yes. So perhaps humans are necessary somewhere.
Yes.
But there are some parts that are especially important to automate some. And you mentioned, dangerous things. I think you mentioned like repetitive things. Or what kind of criteria? What are the best processes that should be automated?
As you said, I mean, in general terms, repetitive things are easier to automate.
Yeah.
Of course, and it makes more sense because then you can scale it up much more. But it's again where we have bottlenecks, so where we can increase productivity, or where we have dangerous things or this stuff. Of course,
in a mine, you have some jobs which are really dangerous, and of course, if we can let the machine do those, we will be happy.
Yeah.
But I think you mentioned before also something that you're trying to be sustainable by minimizing your own use of electricity. And I heard you talk at some point, you're speaking about ventilation, I believe.
That's right.
And you could find like a new use to...
So I mean, one thing is to electrify so we can take down the CO2 footprint, but then of course we can, as you say, also optimize the electricity consumption. So we have made a project in a mine where underground in an underground mine, ventilation is important, and it takes a lot of electricity to do that. But you don't, and the reason is that you have machines going down there, and you have to ventilate as long as we have diesel engines at least. So you need to take that away, but you don't have to ventilate as much if you don't have any activity in the part of a mine. If you don't have people or machines running there, you can reduce that. So it's a simple application to really know then where do we have operation, and then you regulate the ventilation on.
And how do you know where you have operations?
We know where we have machines and people. We have positioning systems in our mines where we can track.
So if no person is in some area, you can reduce ventilation there and focus ventilation on the areas where the people are.
Especially where we don't have any machines running.
Okay. And I guess with more electrical trucks, that also will reduce in the need for ventilation, or?
I can't tell really how that works.
Okay. But bottom line, some prerequisites you had in place because you had all this geopositioning of both your people and your machinery, and now it's about stitching that data together and do the right algorithms in order to steer ventilation.
Exactly,
more or less.
And I mean, long term, there are other possibilities. Of course, you can use sensors to see what type of air or temperature you have, and you can build more advanced algorithms also. We haven't gone that far yet, but it's a lot of possibilities.
But I think it once again it shows, as long as you have a razor-sharp understanding for the problem, you understand what is my data points and what can I work with, you can come up with solutions. But because this was a quite, if I understand it, very successful, but not super advanced project.
No.
For you. You just think it out, drive it through, execute.
But it saves energy and it saves money.
Yeah.
These days, especially when electricity is so expensive.
And environment as well.
And environment, yes. So it's really win-win.
But maybe some sort of overview of where you see the opportunities for analytics and AI around the Boliden business, because now we took an example, right?
Yes.
But could you sort of group it? Could you? How do you think about this?
So again, a lot is around operation stuff, or optimizing different types of processes. Processes if you take, for example, you can start with optimizing planning. How should you run the operation on more tactical level?
Like,
because there's a lot of parameters. Where should you dig first, and what order, or how should you, what mix should you put into your smelters and so on to get out the best. So that's one part, and if we can in a process gain just a promille or maybe a percent, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. So basically, a percentage improvements in planning efficiency has an impact on bottom line, which is quite substantial.
Yes, definitely. So that's one part. Then you have things like we talked about predictive maintenance. It's a classical thing. We haven't really been able to address that. Different reasons. One thing is that we have a lot of machines. A lot of machines are machines that most machines we buy from different Sandvik, Epiroc, Komatsu, different.
And they have their data.
And they have their data, and they have much more data. We buy a few or a couple of machines, but they have maybe 1,000. So obviously they should be able to run their algorithm in more efficient and build their algorithm. But there are also machines that are custom built. For example, these concentrators and so on. They are different for each site and so on. And there, of course, and then we're starting now to apply and see if we can understand when it's going to break or before it's going to break, then we can do maintenance. Because maintenance is a really big part of our operation, and we don't want to stop things unnecessary, but we really don't want to have an unplanned stop. That's even worse.
That's the worst.
So it's
always
really
the worst.
Good to understand. So we do the scheduled maintenance, of course, but now we're getting more and more to get
predictive
and so on, trying that out.
And what about logistics and those areas?
There also you can do that's optimizing then how you run that. So that's also an application. Then if you talk about sustainability, we have also started to, it's not so much of AI, now we're back to visualization in a way, but we are of course monitoring our operation. In a mine there's dams around where you the water you pump up, you have to sediment in a dam and so on, and you can't affect the environment around and so on. And in smelter there is different things that you need to control, and typically this has been done manually. So we have examples where you have people that goes out and take samples in somewhere to analyze the water and do it every week or something to see if something happens. And then we have a case now where we have put in instead cameras with actually edge enabled AI to do
image recognition
image recognition, exactly, to see if something is changing. And what you get there is, first of all, you get automation. People don't have to travel around because they get big areas to take these samples. Yeah. And also you get it real time.
Right.
So it's a big benefit.
Awesome. And for sustainability purposes as well.
Yeah, exactly. You get a quicker alert if something happens and so on.
That's awesome.
But so there are many different areas here. If I go down another route around, cool projects and stuff like that, I saw one of your colleagues. He did a really nice presentation around some of the stuff you've done with 5G and
yes, and
edge intelligence, so to speak. So maybe we can talk. What's your ideas or?
Yeah, also again here automation that is not driven maybe from IT, but from production engineering to really put in autonomous machines or remote controlled trucks and different steps in the mining operation. It requires, of course, connectivity.
Yes.
So we have, during the last now, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, investing heavily in Wi-Fi underground. We have networks with 1,000 access points and so on. So it's quite complex. So that's become, if you talk about outsourcing, that's typically a thing that's a commodity, but for us it's a core thing. We need to work on the architecture of these networks because they're so complex and they are changing. In a mine is a living animal. It's changing all the time. But it's really important to have this connectivity is a prerequisite for doing this.
To collect, to get the data to flow.
Now also
or to steer you.
For a machine, it starts with your monitor machine. Secondly, you can remote control it, and then ultimately it can run autonomously. And the critical step is the remote control. The remote control, then you require much more data going back and forth.
Than monitoring.
When it's autonomous. Autonomous machines don't require that much data.
Because then they're isolated.
They have the intelligence by themselves, but remote control requires a lot of data going back and forth.
And low latency as well, I guess.
And low latency. So, coming back to 5G then, we have tried out 4G LTE and 5G in different pilots. And we have found now then in our open pit mines, mines we have underground mines where you dig holes and like a Swiss cheese down, and then you have what we call open pits, which dagbrott Swedish. They open in an open pit. Wi-Fi is a bit difficult because Wi-Fi don't have that. Reach, right, and you get interference and other stuff. But with 4G, 5G, you can quite easily cover a big area. So
just a couple of base stations and you're done.
Yes. So we have invested now in 2 of our mines, in one up in Gällivare with 5G. Well, it's LTE 5G enabled, so it's going to be. And we have tested now the latency, as you say, because there we will implement autonomous machines and remote control machines in the bigger
Is
scale.
that a collaboration with Ericsson then, or?
Yes. Ericsson and Telia.
And Microsoft, or Telia directly.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So,
and how has that worked? Do you have the prototypes, or is it actually fully operational?
No. Well,
it's
should say we have piloted. Yes, it's more of a ramp up phase now. You can say.
So you could prove this will work, and now, how do we actually implement and scale it? How do we build a production environment?
Exactly. We need also the machines. They're gonna use them and so on. So it's a lot of
and
things. And it takes time.
And typically in a dagbrott, what are you hoping to? What type of autonomous machines and vehicles potentially could you see there?
There it's for example the trucks that takes the ore up. To the concentrator.
You need to talk with my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is what we're talking about, the mining equipment in terms of mining trucks as an example.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
But is this remote control or autonomous for the 5G project?
Well, the intention, the objective is to have autonomous, yeah.
But I guess for 5G is even more important for remote controlling the trucks because of the low latency it provides, or?
Both, yes. So I think we will have both type of use cases for that.
It sounds really interesting. Can you go in some depth on the technology there? If you go more into remote controlling, you can understand. And you can understand the engineering challenges in building that system with low latency and stability that you need. But autonomous, we're moving into self-driving cars area. And this is a favorite topic of everyone, I think. Can you mention a bit about, how do you go about trying to build autonomous trucks?
Yeah, we're not building them. We're buying them. There are suppliers that
so
also.
Scania or Volvo is the supplier, right?
Right.
But how do you build a system, a mining system with autonomous trucks in them? If I rephrase the question.
That's the project we're entering now, exactly to set this up. So it's many components. It's the network, then the 5G network. It's the truck themselves, and it's the control software, which
controlling,
is advanced.
The mastermind.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, I'm sure there's more also, but I'm CIO, so I don't know.
No, but the core components here, like the autonomous vehicle has some functionality what they do, but you are putting them into a system. And a mine for me is this is why this is super interesting, right? Because we are doing data and AI within a system, right? Dagbrott är ju som ett system, va?
Exactly, and then of course it's positioning to understand where things are, and it's a lot of data to run this.
And ultimately, even if you have the perfect autonomous driving vehicle in isolation as one truck, right? Now we need to put that into the whole system of trucks and planning them to not crash or not to have the right flow and all this.
Right, and that's what the challenge, to have them run in a mixed environment, as you say, where we have people and where you have other vehicles which is not autonomous, so they have to be able to run in the same place and in a safe way.
The people is horrible, to control as well. So it's hard to remote control people, I think, but.
But let's dig into this from maybe more from your angle. So how do we think about a program, a project like this in terms of, I can't see yet one supplier that sort of can do this. Like you have maybe Scania or Volvo to do one part, and you have Ericsson to do one part, and then you have someone to do the algorithm. So how do you? Can you sort of when you put this together, how do you go about thinking about suppliers and your partnerships around this?
Yeah, well,
on principle level, don't go further than that.
No, exactly. I mean, we have made a selection, and I don't know how far the negotiation, etc. But we haven't implemented yet. This
must have been on your agenda. How to think about this?
Yes, I mean the technology is there.
Yeah,
there are trucks available. There are systems offered, and there are networks capable of.
So you can find the different pieces, right?
Yes. But it's a big project to put it together. But that's what's our core competence, I would say, in Boliden, to put big things together, to build a mine or a bigger smelter. It is a lot of different components you need to put together to work in a system.
Super exciting stuff.
But it also takes time. You have to be aware of that.
Still, the curious tech side of me still wants to dig a bit deeper.
You can ask. Maybe I can't answer, but I can.
No, of course, and I understand that. Of course, it's hard. I mean, you're the CIO, and you have to have the overview of things. But for one, you have the autonomous trucks, and it's mainly like Scania or Volvo, someone building it. But if you know any details about how they work, that would be super interesting to understand. And second part would be the logistics of how you control them together in a system, as we mentioned, and if you have any insights into or anything that you can share about, how do you build that? How do you do that to actually have a safe system?
I can share one thing. I'm not an expert in trucks, but as I have some interest in the networks from my time in Ericsson, and a discussion we have had. Now it's solved, but that's quite a long time. That is what should you call it? The possibility for us to run a mine without connection to the outer world, so to say.
Right.
Because traditionally, a mobile network, a 4G network and 3G, etc., you have a core node, is the brain in Stockholm, or you have it nationally, and then you have base stations around, and everything is controlled via the central core node. but we need to have this core local core is called, because if the line is cut, we need to be able to continue to operate.
Right.
And that's another architecture, and that was difficult for the telecom suppliers to put in place, really.
So you have your private 5G
Yes.
network in
Yes.
this case. You have to.
Yes, and it works even if the cable is cut. It works locally.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that is a key thing. And also, I mean, from latency point of view, it makes no sense to send the signals via Stockholm when you're controlling a machine, or from security point of view or whatever. It needs to be possible to work locally.
Yeah.
So that's for what we do. Other industries have other use cases in 5G where they use the public network, and they have dedicated channels in that. So that. But for our case, we need a private network.
5G is still, it is available in Stockholm and some places and other parts of Sweden. But do you have any insights into what the main differences are between 5G and 4G, for example?
No, 5G is many different things.
Yeah. Can you mention
to my
some?
understanding? No. I mean, there are different 5Gs. Different 5G.
Yeah, right. Yes, of course.
Aspects.
Different status, similar to 4G, I guess, as well. But, yeah.
No, 4G is more homogeneous. That's more one standard. But 5G is not the standard. There are different flavors of 5G, depending if you have it publicly or if you have a private 5G, etc.
Right.
But what's important for us is the capacity, the low latency, and also the ability to control the capacity with network slicing and so on, so you can dedicate specific bandwidths to specific machines and so on.
So I have some one of my best friends, Daniel Lewis. He was on this podcast talking about this a little bit. Like, if I rephrase what you said, you saw to check if my understanding is correct. There are different flavors of 5G, literally meaning you need to be quite sharp understanding what type of data use case you have.
Yes.
To put it simple, are you streaming video and you need a shitload of bandwidth, so to speak, for streaming? This is one type of 5G, but then you have another type of 5G when it's very low bit rates that needs to be sent, that is quite different. So this is 4G was more homogeneous, and here and right now you have sort of, I think it's 4 or 5 flavors, which is within the realm of 5G.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it has very different.
It's all called 5G, but it's really different.
Really different in terms of use cases and data need. Data. What are you trying to solve, right? Which I find that very interesting, by the way, because it really now puts a spin on the whole industry. That before we could have people who understood data and AI and the use cases over here, and we could have infra people here smacking up base towers and selling you infra, right? Now you need to understand the whole value chain in order to select the right type of 5G. So you really need to understand holistically what the hell are you trying to do now when you get this to work, if you really want to do autonomous edge intelligence with cloud and central. So this is a different ballgame, I think. Would you agree on that?
Yeah. It is, and back to what I said before about Wi-Fi as well. It's kind of core competence for us because it's part of the specific system we are building on our side. So.
Perhaps we should move into cybersecurity or something. But before we do that, I would like to ask a silly question. From an ignorant person like me in the mining industry, I don't know much about it. But mining gold is a fantasy that I think a lot of people are hoping about. But can you mention a bit about what is the availability and the sites in Sweden or nearby countries where it is actually economically viable to mine gold these days? How does it work?
I'm not a geologist. So I don't know all the details, but there's gold obviously up in Västerbotten where Boliden started. They started to find gold, etc. I think it's gold in other places also, but typically is that it's not when you dig gold, you don't dig only gold. It's other minerals as well.
So it's a combined effect.
Yeah. So if you call it a gold mine, then maybe the gold is the most valuable thing there. But in other places where you dig copper, for example, or zinc, I'm not sure what's connected to gold mostly. But then you get a fraction of gold as well. So you get maybe a fraction of platinum or rhodium or palladium or those types as well, and they're very, very small, and the trick is then to separate it,
right?
Which we are quite good at.
The separators.
To separate the different
and concentrate
minerals.
it into the pure minerals.
Yeah. So that's it.
So you can't do it like you see in Western movies when
No,
you go out
it's
like
not
a single person mine from a waterfall or something.
Exactly. In Sweden, well, maybe you can do that in some places in a way also, but in Sweden you don't have that with gold nuggets in that sense. It's smaller.
You need to
grains.
separate it, grains out
you
of the
need to crush
rock.
it and separate it. So.
Yeah.
Silly question, but still,
No, it's interesting. We actually we have a place. I shouldn't say where, but where we do the final refinery of gold, where you make the gold
bars. Yeah.
So
what do you call it in English?
Gold bars.
gold bars,
right.
guldtacka.
Right. So do you know the weight of a 1 liter?
Yeah.
But I try to lift it, but I don't know the weight.
Is it like 12 kilos
No,
or
I think it's 19.
19, 20? I was going to say 12 or 20.
So grab one. It's it's heavy.
And you've done that?
I've done it once. Yes, it's quite an astonishing feeling, and it's at that time. Now the gold price, I'm not sure, but at that time it was like 4 million Swedish crowns or something.
In your hand.
In your hand.
Wasn't there a competition if you could actually grab one from the top? Where they had the slants on the side, you could actually get the bars.
Yeah. If you can grab it, it's yours.
Yeah, there's some rumors around that. I don't know.
Yeah, but so this is one of your secret sites in Boliden. So
Right. Yes.
We don't talk where that is.
No.
We don't give out the phone number and the. So let's move from gold to securing gold, or data security.
Data security.
IT security. I know this has been a big topic on your agenda for many years in different ways, and we haven't really talked so much about the data IT security angle on this podcast, which I think is extremely important and interesting when we.
So maybe you want days.
Maybe you set it up even better, like. So
we have seen so many attacks coming up, in recent times with ransomware and whatnot, and there are a lot more that people don't even know about that happen all the time. And I guess in your case, there are so many important use cases. If it were to happen, if someone attacks, or gets into the systems you have, and they can cause an planned stop of whatever plant you have or system you have. I guess it's so important, but if you were to phrase it, what is the need from Boliden to have a high level of cybersecurity?
Yeah. I mean, cybersecurity is, I think, top of the list of most CIOs today in different ways, and there are different drivers in this. In many companies, it's about protecting information. As I said, if you have a production company, or if you're a consumer company, you don't need to protect your R&D, your IPR information, your customer database or whatever. For us, it's more of protecting the OT environment.
Availability, protecting
availability. Protect the availability, exactly. Because that's what we talked about. We are a production company. The more we produce, the more income we get. So we don't want to have a interruption there in any way. So and since things now hangs together, the IT and OT hangs together, it's been clear, and that is really clear from management, even from the board, that we need to have one responsibility around all cybersecurity matters, whether it's IT or OT. You can't separate it. It's not possible. You need to take the whole grip on it.
Can you just elaborate a bit more on why IT and OT hangs together in that way? Is it because it simply has to, or is it?
No, well, yeah. Well, it's first of all what we're talking about here, the analytics. I mean, you use data from the machines to do analytics, and you do the analytics in the cloud maybe. So I mean, there you have the connection. You need to you drag data, and then you push it back to control it or something. So I mean, then you open a channel, and if you have opened a channel, then it's theoretically possible to
sort of feedback loops between the IT and OT, and you need to.
Then we have other things. I mean, we have maintenance done remotely from suppliers, because we don't want to wait for technicians to fly to our sites, which take a week to fix a thing maybe. So we open up, of course, then they can go in and fix the software on the machines. And then,
and when you did that, machine was OT, but in order to have a remote channel for, they went over the network, and then all of a sudden IT and OT for the remote to work. It's
exactly so every case of this opens up a hole in a way, and makes it theoretically possible to. And then we also know what the cyber criminals do. They hack your account somewhere, and there's some mail, and then they go into the next system, and then they find another user, and then they jump into the system. So as long as you have some kind of connection, some kind of a common network system, data flow, it's vulnerable. Yeah.
So it's super important for Boliden.
So the discussion we have had, of course, is should we have it that way? And yes, I mean that's the way we think we can run this operation efficient. And the other way would be to separate it and say that no, we will not have any analytics. You do only work locally, and we don't have any interaction with external.
For safety reasons.
For safety reasons, like I think nuclear power plants has, in a way, they have full air gap, right?
I work with that in Vattenfall. We have the different zones. I build systems for this, and it's separate completely, and then level. Different left zones, and the last zone there is it's terminal server. There is no connection.
Yeah, exactly. You have full air gap.
Full air gap.
So of course, I mean, we have zones, and we have segmentation, and we build the firewalls, and we do all these kind of steps. But still, it's not air gap, full air gap.
No, not in Boliden. Yeah.
No. So I got question from someone now maybe 3 years ago from the board and from the management. So are we safe enough? Are we secure enough?
Yeah. So doing a risk analysis basically. Or?
So what do you say on that question? You start a discussion around what level should we be on? Because I mean, again here, should we allow this? Should we have a separate environment? And then we decided that now, well, we need to have the operate this way, but we should have a level that is among the best in industrial companies. So we set up a level there, and then we made an assessment. We used the NIST framework, the American NIST framework. So work on identify the risks, to protect the environment, to detect if things are coming in, and then to prepare for respond and recover if something happens. And we are currently running a 3-year program to I mean, if you do an assessment, of course you find gaps in some areas and work, and then it's a moving target maybe, but
okay. So can you just, how do you make, I mean, for one, you need to analysis and find the weak points that you have in your system, and then you need to start to, work to remove the worst, weak points that you have. Is it more, in which part would you say that the most dangerous ways to attack, if we call it that, your system would be? Can you, perhaps it's stupid to actually say our weakest points is this.
well, you can answer that in different ways. I would say that the weakest point is people.
Yes.
I mean, maybe you
social engineering.
So social engineering is what we need to understand.
It starts with a click of something. I actually clicked on something I shouldn't have done a couple of days ago. It was obvious a fake. No, our firewall didn't allow me to open that link or whatever. It was already identified as risky. So
you have some security system in place.
But it's so easy. It's so easy. They make customized mails sent out with things, and there it starts. Suddenly someone does it, and then they're in. So, but we're working a lot with awareness, of course. Yeah. And we come along
so
there.
People are in the people, so to speak.
Yes, and people don't answer internal surveys because they don't want to click on things.
That's a good excuse to have. I don't want to do this stupid survey.
Security.
I don't do it because of security reasons.
But
okay, yeah, but that's. I think that's very insightful. That the biggest weak point is always people, and building awareness is number key.
And then another thing that's the weak point that we are chasing, that's legacy. And in an old company, you have a lot of legacy. Yeah. Again, back to production environments, you traditionally have more legacy maybe than in office environments. You have old.
But could you accept so a legacy? In what way is this the risk? Or could you elaborate on the different risks comes with legacy? Because I think this is really important. Because people forget about this.
There are vulnerabilities. I mean, there are vulnerabilities in new stuff as well, but. In newer stuff, the suppliers, if it's software or hardware suppliers, they send out patches as soon as they find it. But in old things, maybe you have a simpler architecture, and you don't get patches any longer, and so on. So, in that sense, it's vulnerable.
But I really like that you highlight this topic because maybe we are through that now. But if I go back 2 or 3 years, we were really afraid of cloud. And how the security was a problem in the cloud. And of course we have there are things to mitigate in terms of security with public clouds and all this. But sometimes I found conversations which was quite ridiculous. It's like, you are sort of filtering mosquitoes here and letting through elephants.
You're crazy. I do understand where you're getting it.
The conversations.
My view is if you go to the bigger cloud suppliers, that is a much more safer environment in this respect.
They are world class.
They patch. They have the newest hardware and everything like that, and they have monitoring and everything, and they can put in so much more effort in securing it. Of course, they are also more interesting target, but they put in more. So my view is it's safer in that sense.
And I've had this argument in Vattenfall, and in the end, I think the cloud cluster won this conversation quite objectively with ISEC in terms of we swayed them. When we looked at the hardcore facts, it's like we cannot go to this length of keeping this secure in our physical data centers as this is done. Now, having said that, there are some true private cloud weak points, or we have the Cloud Act and all that. So you need to be aware of those topics, of course, but so it's not comparing apples with apples. Cloud security and on-prem security is very different.
Operational-wise, the big cloud is secure, very secure. You have to work on the access, though.
Now we talk.
Because you use the internet and so on, and so for example, multi-factor authentication or similar things is mandatory, really, if you work on cloud services.
But follow-on question then, because I think it's Lars Albertsson who sort of highlights this quite well. Is like cybersecurity is super important, but it's a little bit like you need to be humble that what was cybersecurity and the onion layered approach, and we talked about on-prem, there are other dimensions, there are other things to consider when we now talk about this in the cloud. So in one way it's more secure, but you need to understand vulnerability and security in a different way. Could you, do you have any, I don't know enough about this, but I can sense that it's correct. That security is different.
And one answer also is to accept this, or you talk about assumed breach. I mean that you need to assume that you are hacked or will get hacked, etc. So now monitoring is also really, really important to identify if you get a breach or something. So I mean, so we're buying a security operation center service, and we're installing EDRs and different software to identify something that happened. I think that's a key thing to do.
Cool. And one really big thing that I think,
and that just one comment, and that is difficult in the OT environment because the OT environment is another type of architecture. It works well in the IT environment with the monitoring, but the OT is, you need to think differently.
I can imagine so. But there was a super big security hole that came out just like a month ago, or December, November. I would argue, I don't think people understand how big it was. It was, I think, the biggest one in like 10 years with Log4Shell. And I think every company has to, really spend so much money in trying to try to figure out and fill those holes, so to speak, that open up. Has that been a big thing for you guys as well?
It's been a lot of work during
during the holidays.
New Year, yeah. We've been scanning and getting from some the bigger suppliers. Then they do the scanning and tell us what they found, but there's so much more.
But could you open up a little bit what is this?
It's a JavaScript.
Is it?
That's built in many softwares in different places.
It's a software package called Java or Log4j that can call some other services. And Java is one of the biggest
used
languages that we have, and this is actually a very old security vulnerability that's been around since 2013, but no one has really found it until I think it was end of November or something last year, like a month ago. And then suddenly you can get shell access, and you can run a code remotely on basically any system that you have in the world. It's extremely dangerous because it's so widespread.
And because the bottom line is that because this is in Java's core, sort of how everybody has been coding Java, right? So it's everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oops.
It is a very big oops, for sure. And it's the dangerous thing with that is, I shouldn't speak about this. But anyway, some people that are abusing this, that they can plant stuff, that you don't, know about. So even if you upgrade the system and you have a new version of whatever software that you have, and you need to upgrade, so many systems to make this system secure, you don't know if they abuse it or not, because they could have been planting, some kind of backdoor in your system that they don't activate until like half a year later. And this is why, even if you upgrade everything, you're not safe then. We don't know what will happen in half a year when someone, will start activating these kind of backdoors. So this is such a big thing.
But did companies take this? Because it was interesting how you answered that question. You took this seriously and you acted quite heavily on it.
For different reasons. First of all, we have during the last year increased our internal capacity in cybersecurity. We actually employed someone that is very skilled in vulnerability scanning and so on.
So you had someone who was on the ball immediately.
We also have a partner running our security operations center, which is helpful and skillful and so on. So I think it's important that you, internal or external, make sure that you have partners, advisors, help around this also.
Because I really wonder, if we look at the spectrum of all the different, from very, very large organizations to mid-sized organizations, how many has fully, like you did, we had some busy work, because in theory, this will touch so many companies in Sweden. Everyone, I would say. And who had a small weekend project over Christmas? I don't think everybody did. I don't think they did.
No. It's tough to be a small company, I think.
For sure.
And again, I think you need to partner up in some way or the other.
And use cloud services perhaps as much as you can to avoid having to do everything yourself, at least.
No, and then taking it, Boliden has a fair size, and then we have some other companies in Sweden who are even a lot bigger and global. I mean, like it's so much work. It's a crazy amount of work.
Cool. So what's your current strategy for cybersecurity? I mean, you're spending a lot of time and money on it, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, we driving this program, and it's about doing different type of risk assessments and vulnerability scanning and these kind of things to identify. It's about working on our protection, different types of access management, multi-factor authentication, segmentation, and different ways of making it difficult to break in and go through. We're working on expanding the security operations center for monitoring. And as I said, we're now moving into the OT environment, which has bigger challenges.
And what are the main things that you realize you need to think differently?
The thing is that a lot of machines and control systems don't allow you to put EDRs as the endpoint detection on them. But there are other ways. You can monitor the network traffic instead, and there are different other things you can do. But you have to think differently. And then, of course, it's about the soft things to prepare. And now that's really not only IT to prepare. If things happen, what do we do? Yeah. Then can you run the operation? How do we recover the IT part and restore and going back? It takes time. And look at the colleagues. Kommun now, they almost up and running. Yeah. Not yet fully, I think.
But I think that's another dimension of security work or disaster work. And we have this now quite, how did Europe work in the pandemic, in the COVID situation? So what is your plans or what happened? And even going all the way back to, I talked to my father who has some insight in the hospital medical industry, like what was our problem? Why did we have so many old people die? Well, the plan was there in theory, but we weren't prepared. We didn't have the supplies. We hadn't stocked up. I mean, like the equivalent, what's the plan and can we execute when shit happens, right? So I like that comment, how to be scenario planning and be prepared when it happens.
Cool. Can you speak a bit more about the NIST framework, perhaps, how it works? Because I think some other companies would be interested in as well.
I'm not an expert in that, but it's about those things said about to identify where you have a risk, about protecting your environment, about detecting when things happen, about recover and respond and recover when you get attacked, and also about the umbrella of governance of policies and instructions and how you set this up. And so there's a structure. We made an assessment based on that. There are other frameworks as well, but I think that's quite established a good framework. And the assessment we made, the supplier there were able to benchmark us because they have made similar assessment with the same structure than on other companies. And that is important because, back to what we said before, what should you do, how much should you do? And we decided we should be among the best of industrial companies. But how do you know that?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you know where you are? And you need to benchmark one way. So
how did it go then? Could you mention that?
We do a lot of stuff. Okay. We will do new assessments this spring, so hopefully I'm sure we have improved a lot. But I'm not sure how far.
It's great.
A second thing also about measurement. I've also established a scorecard around cybersecurity. Again, also to understand how good we are, and there are a number of different things you can set up. I haven't found any good practice in this, but we're measuring maturity, we're measuring vulnerability. There are services you can buy, scanning you can buy, etc. You can compare, and we're matching things like patching levels and so. I think it's good to go through to see that you're improving, and in some of the KPIs we can compare to other.
And at least to have a structured approach for how to assess the current, level that you have and how to improve going forward. It sounds like you're truly taking it seriously. So
definitely.
Cool.
I mean, like we've been talking so many good, cool topics here, but there is a couple of core topics that we're of course not going to have time for now. But I mean, like there's two ways. In some ways, I would like to talk more about sort of the core ideas on how to organize and think around driving data and analytics maturity, or look how the whole change management and all that. That is one topic that I like to talk about. But then of course, if we do that, we don't have any time to talk about other fun stuff on a more macro level. So should we go down sort of tips and tricks from Göran Kördel on how to succeed when transform and driving data, or should we do some macro level topics? What do you want, Göran?
Your choice.
If we just list a couple of things here, change management is one. How do you make a company become increasingly secure or data driven, etc.? That could be one topic. Another
organizational, because we concluded you have a very interesting. You have a decentralized organization in the way the core business is running, and I find that highly interesting to understand. How do we understand central core business platform versus all this? How to organize IT and AI now? This is another topic.
So one is the centralized versus embedded or distributed kind of setup for data scientists or data engineers or that kind of, or analysts. That could be one question. Another is more like recruitment and how to build successful teams.
You had another. Let's help you. Let's talk about topics that is top on your agenda. Building competencies is another one.
That's as I said, the challenge to have the capability in analytics in general, and I think there's a need of increased competence and more resources in many different
types
places.
of roles.
And I think in this area as well as in other development area, you need probably some kind of center of excellence or whatever you call it to take care of a platform and maybe be a missionary in this area and these kind of things. Keep the
evangelist or
evangelist, yeah. Then you need people that semi-centralized that do maybe more programming data engineers and so on. And then you have the data scientists or the users of different parts that should be really, really close out in the business.
Right.
But the Center of Excellence also need to make sure that there is a network ongoing, because if you talk about central local organization or change management, it all boils down to that people talk to each other, that you build relationship, that you have a dialogue around things. Otherwise, it won't work. Nothing works if you don't have connection.
I mean, I like it. If it's too distributed, it's like an completely like
fragmented or siloed is somewhere down the line it can happen.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have any they don't have the critical mass, I guess. If you're too distributed and just work like a single or two people trying to have some kind of analytics or AI success, that they're too small to do it themselves. So they need at least some support from some kind of centralized organization, right?
Yeah. But exactly, as I said, it's not only in analytics. It's in many different aspects. So that's why our IT organization has a we don't call it Center of Excellence, but it's a central IT delivery organization. But it's so vital and important to have the local groups on each mining and smelter site to be close to the operation and to really solve the specific needs and listen to an understanding. Yeah. And then what I'm struggling with is, of course, to make this work together, because we need to have interaction, you need to have dialogue, you need to have information sharing around this.
And we've heard and put different words, and I'm working on exactly these topics in the same topics, right? So it's no difference. But and we've used different words to talk about this. We have talked about decentralized and central. We talk about the hub and spoke.
Yeah.
And we're talking now about federated sharing and federated governance. And
Many names of same thing.
And ultimately, the core problem is what you're highlighting, right? How do we work together and understanding how we harvest what is done, reuse what is done, learning from each other, within still allowing autonomy and speed. So is the tug of war, autonomy and speed in the one case, in the one team, and at the same time not fragmenting the shit out of everything or not harvesting or reinventing the wheel. So this is one of the things that we need to solve, right? And I think the whole organization around how we understand IT supply, IT demand is in some ways what we have already highlighted. It's shifting. The truth from the 90s doesn't hold true anymore. What do you think?
Well, the truth from the 90s was what you're referring to.
IT Tom, IT Tom launched by I think Gartner or McKinsey probably. How to who coined the word IT supply, IT demand?
Okay, no,
more or less.
Right. No,
more or less.
It's not working any longer. No.
No, and it's not that we don't need central resources and platform resources. No. It's just a different dynamic.
Yeah, and then it comes down to interest and attitude and that type of skills, not only the technical skills. People that really interesting and burning for it and interesting to have this dialogue and understanding and so on. Yeah.
Awesome. I was eager to bring up the boring topic of regulation, but I think we should skip that.
Well, it's quite easy because we are in a business that's not so regulated on this side. We have a lot of regulation when it comes to environment and license to operate a mine, but not on the IT side.
Well, that's very. I guess you don't have that many.
Because we sell to a commodity marketplace. We don't need to worry about customer GDPR topics.
Data is about machines to a large extent as well, and I guess
yes, of course we have a GDPR to consider, but it's mainly employee data and so on.
Yeah, employee data, and everybody has employee data, but then they have the rest.
Yes.
Yeah. You should be lucky, I think.
But what about AI? Upcoming AI regulations, the AI Act. Have you looked into that at all yet?
No. But it's
because here I guess there is any system that has some sort of algorithm inside it is an AI system and should therefore be yada yada yada. So then you get dragged into this rabbit hole. Have a look at that.
I think that's important.
But it hasn't been.
It's not decided on yet.
It's a draft.
It's
the first draft.
It's basically based on risk. So applications of AI that is of high risk, like if it's in medicine and it can cause people to die, then that application is much more highly regulated than other types of application of AI. And I guess in some way, if you were to have autonomous trucks and people at the same place, it could be considered high risk potentially. But I think you're rather safe, though. Yeah, in this.
Because they've clustered it in such a way that you don't. I don't think your use cases are the main ones that fall into the. No. Interesting. I don't think.
You should be a lucky.
You're in a good. Sure. You're in a good industry for this.
Cool.
We're running. I don't know. Like we can go on forever, but
just one final, perhaps more philosophical or societal topic. Then, the progress in AI is moving in such an extreme phase or speed, and we can do so much more today than we could just a few years ago. Some people are a bit scared about the development as well, and that can. Have biases, or it can actually at some point take control that we can't even, as humans, start to control. Is that something you are concerned with, or are you rather?
It's an interesting topic. I read the book of Mats Tegmark.
Yeah, Life 3.0.
Exactly, it's interesting. Well, first of all, it takes time, as with all technology, the technology is maybe there, but it takes so much longer time to implement and use it. So we will have time to discuss it. But as Mats Tegmark brings up, I think it's important that we have a debate around it, and that people in general and politicians and others are discussing this topic, because it's not obvious. And what we mentioned here, what should we regulate and what should we not regulate? It's key questions for the future.
And if I may, we have to bring up at least one quote from Elon Musk, I think, during. I think we may have done one, but let me bring at least a second one. So, he speaks about regulation of AI in rather extreme ways. And he compares, for example, regulation of seat belts in cars. So that was around 1950s or so. And at that time, the car industry was heavily against putting in regulation for having to use seat belts. And all the statistics were showing that, if you were to have put in seatbelts earlier, you would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But then, the industry was fighting it and lobbying against it, and it didn't happen until like 10 years later. Now he says, that's fine. You just lost hundreds of thousands of lives. But he says that in AI's case, I am speaking about this in a dystopian way. Anyway, I'm just, praising him. He says that we can't wait 10 years for AI. If we were to have the same kind of problem that we had with seatbelts for AI, it would be a problematic situation. Because the power of AI is growing exponentially. So even though we can seem to have control in a really strong way today, 10 years later it could be a completely different situation. So therefore, he says we can't wait for, normally the regulation is happening in a reactive way. Some big accident is happening, cybersecurity, we can see it for sure. Cybersecurity, we have so many things happening, so we need to do something. But for AI, we haven't really had these kind of big extreme accidents yet.
It's the same thing that Mats Tegmark says. I mean, earlier with the nuclear bomb,
right.
You could have one bomb and see the consequence, and then you can regulate. But with AI, it could grow scale so quickly, so we can't control it. So the scalability and the speed is maybe too big to. So
what we are saying then is that we kind of need to proactively think about this and start debating it and discussing it, and we can't react to AI. We need to proactively.
Yes, but we need to involve others than our
experts.
Like
the cross. This is many different cross-functional considerations. That's what we are saying, right?
Agree.
Why do we end with this? It's
you did end with an agreement.
What's up for Boliden coming up? Can you mention something about coming years? What are you going to focus on? What's the top of your agenda for coming years?
Well, I can mention one thing that's important for Boliden. We made a decision to make a big investment in Norway, which I think is the biggest industrial investment in Norway ever, like 700 million euros in a building out of zinc smelters. And it's now, don't quote me on the figures, but more almost double the capacity in the zinc smelter there. But we only add like 20% more employees. And then you understand how much of automation.
Now we're talking. We start moving into the concepts of dark factories or dark mines.
No, not completely, but it's a lot of automation. Plus that it's we need to calculate that also. But almost fossil-free production. So.
So very ambitious industrial project.
That's an interesting thing. But otherwise, it's a lot about autonomous. Trucks in machines in the mining and really use it. That's my vision. Then on top of this is that we're really going to use all data for our production. We have so much of value in our data.
So basically, 2022 from a data perspective is quite exciting because it's like the inflection point a little bit in terms of demand has happened, and now it's up to put things and get things moving and rolling, and then realizing your vision around data.
So only that little small thing.
The small little thing of delivery.
Execute
and deliver.
Right.
Sounds like you have a really exciting future, I think, and job.
It's good fun. And then, anything turning maybe 1 minute privately, and anything for fun or interesting or exciting that you will do in 2022 or coming up?
Another thing that's a bit related to this is that I'm started to engage a bit with startups. As I've started to engage a bit in business angel fund and
that's
looking into this, and we're looking into different startups, bit in AI, but also in other areas, and that is a really thrilling.
That sounds really fun. Is this together with someone I know?
Yeah, it's different constellations, but that is Stockholms Affärsänglar is one, and it's another group as well. I'm engaged in, so that's
super
really
fun.
And it's so different from a big company. When you're dealing with startups, you have a small bunch of entrepreneurs that have found something and they're burning on it, and sometimes it's really, really good, and sometimes it's not so realistic and so, but it's interesting.
And how and what triggered you, and how did it's your friends and the network and that sort of dragged you into this?
You can say that, yeah. So that
sounds really fun.
It is.
There's something for the after work too.
So I hope that can develop a bit.
Yeah, the Draknästet of Göran Kördel.
Right.
And then I guess we have one final question. Do you have anyone you would like to listen to or see on this pod? Help us find the best and interesting guests.
Oh, I have to think about that. In one aspect, of course, it is interesting to listen to other in similar situation, other with manufacturing companies, and what we talked about, OT challenges and these kind of things. That's interesting. But on the other hand, sometimes it's interesting to listen to someone that's completely different environment. So I have to think about that. I don't have a name, but
you don't have a name. Not want a name drop in front.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. So then, Göran, thank you very much. And these hours flew away.
Yeah,
we had all this leadership and talent and change that we never got to, but we had some really good topics. I think.
Thank you. So, pleasure.
Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.